Good morning. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good morning. Thanks everybody for coming out. I'm Dr. Ryder. I'm so glad to see everybody here. This is our first Promise Day event of the spring semester, so thanks for coming out. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but April is National Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and so this is our first of 5 events to promote resources, awareness, and education of issues surrounding sexual assault, violence, and other related issues. Professor Kim Breivogel, Professor Claire McIlvaney, Instructor Tyler Flockhart, Instructor Paige Roseman, and I would like to welcome you to these events today, and thank you for coming out. So we call our events Promise Day events. We're saying promise to speak up, promise to listen, promise not to assault, promise not to participate in a culture that promotes sexualization, assault, and victimization of anyone. You're going to see lots of teal here today. You have teal t-shirts. Teal is the color for sexual assault awareness, so if you grabbed a t-shirt, that's why they're teal. And if anyone asks, you can contribute to the conversation of sexual assault awareness prevention. Let's see. So this year's theme of the national movement is I ask, meaning I ask for consent. And also I recognize the other person's right to take away consent. Before Professor Breivogel introduces our wonderful guest speaker, I'd like to make sure everyone has signed into the event. I'm Dr. Ryder. I have my own sign-in sheet. Dr. Wallingford has her own sign-in sheet. Just before you leave, make sure that you're signed in. And if you're staying for the 1 o'clock event, which I hope y'all can, it's also in this room, make sure that you sign into the 1 o'clock sign-in. They're separate sheets. I would also like to thank Lieutenant Charlie Core for being here today. Here's Lieutenant Core. He's with the Wake Tech. He's with our Wake Tech Police Force. He's always been so supportive of all of our events, and he's going to actually talk to y'all at the 1 o'clock event, so hopefully you can stick around. So now I'd like to hand this over to Professor Breivogel. Thank you.
We are super excited to have Dr. Renee Lamphere here with us today, all the way from UNC Pembroke. Dr. Lamphere is an associate professor of criminal justice there in the Department of Sociology. She has a BA in Communication Studies and Public Justice, a master's degree, and a PhD in criminology. So we're looking at an expert here. We're very lucky she's here. She is a respected scholar in the areas of corrections, family violence, cyber and digital media crimes, and school violence. And special passion of hers is sexual assault awareness. So she actively advocates for survivors of sexual assault, and she travels around to events like this, promoting awareness and trying to get everybody on the same page, recognizing that we need to know what this is and speak up. So thank you for joining us here today for Promise Day. Let's give a round of applause to our speaker.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes. Okay, good. So first I want to say thank you again to Dr. Ryder and everybody here at the college for even thinking of me for this event. Whenever anybody asks me to speak in an event like this, it's truly a humbling and an honoring experience. So I really am glad to be here. I've been preparing this speech for you since they invited me months ago. So I'm very excited to meet you all and to share this time with you today. So today I'm going to share with you some of my own experiences as a sexual assault survivor, and in particular in sexual violence that occurred to me while I was on a college campus. I will say that for as outspoken as I have been about my experiences with sexual victimization, especially in the past few years, it still takes me back when I know that I'm asked to do something like an event like today because of the experiences that I had. It reminds me that I'm part of a club, really, I wouldn't say it's a special club, I say it's a crappy club, and the worst part about it is I never asked to be a part of it. But I suspect that some of you are a part of that club too, and if you're not a part of that club, I guarantee that you know somebody who is a part of that club. So this is an important issue, even if it doesn't affect you directly, it affects all of us indirectly. So we are here today because April is National Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Understanding and recognizing campus sexual assault is important for many reasons. So here are some facts that I gathered for you before we get into too much content about sexual violence on college campuses and why it's important that we have these conversations. First, women ages 18 to 24 in general are at an elevated risk of sexual violence. And among undergraduate students, approximately 23%, or that equates to about 1 in 4 female, and 5.4% of all male college students will experience rape or sexual assault through physical force, violence, or incapacitation. I'll say that again, 1 in 4 college women. When hearing statistics like this, we also must keep in mind that, much like sexual assault elsewhere, college students who experience sexual violence often do not report their victimization. Only 20% of female student victims ages 18 to 24 report to law enforcement. Recently, at a conference I was at, I had heard a term that I've heard my whole entire life, but I heard it in a different way. The term that I heard was the freshman 15. Has anyone ever heard of the freshman 15? So maybe when you heard of the freshman 15, at least when I first heard about it, I thought about going to college, eating bad food, not getting a lot of exercise, and gaining 15 pounds your first year. Anybody ever heard anything like that? Some of you? Okay. Well, the freshman 15 has a new meaning now. Today, this definition refers to the period of time between students' arrival on campus and Thanksgiving, about 15 weeks for most schools. Research shows that female students, particularly freshmen, are at an increased risk of being sexually assaulted during this time period. So something like the freshman 15 now has a completely different meaning. So given this increased risk of victimization, it's important that we have conversations like the one we're going to have today about sexual assault on college campuses. So today I want to share my story with you. I want to share my survival story with you. I was briefly introduced, and I appreciate the introduction, but I want to mention a little bit more about my background. So I'm from a small little town in upstate New York. My town is called Middleville. At the last census, there was 600 people there. We've got one light, it blinks yellow and red, and you can't get gas after 9 o'clock at night. Everything's closed. So both of my graduate degrees are in criminology. My undergraduate degrees were in criminal justice and communication studies, but I actually started off my college career as a music education major. So music education, criminology, that seems like a pretty big leap. And I will explain to you the events that happened that led to that change in my life. In addition to teaching criminal justice, I also teach sociology courses. And when I'm teaching Introduction to Sociology, I teach my students about the butterfly effect. Who's heard of the butterfly effect before? So some of you know what I'm talking about. Simply put, the butterfly effect occurs when a very small event has exceedingly large and far-reaching impact. The metaphor is that a butterfly could flip its wings, as fragile as they are, and while it might not stir up much air as they flap, that minute movement may initiate a series of changes that grow such that eventually cause a large storm thousands of miles away. In broader terms, the butterfly effect means that large events may be tied to small or even minuscule occurrences. In teaching this, I've often reflected on one decision that I made that has kind of changed my whole life story, the decision that brought me here before you today. We'll talk about my last lecture that I gave in 2013, but when I had to give my lecture, I referred to this situation as the best $2 that I never spent. And I will tell you now about the best $2 that I never spent. So I want to preface this story by saying that I by no means condone drinking or underage drinking for college students. But I do have to tell you that alcohol did play a major role in this occurrence, and I wouldn't be able to truthfully and honestly tell you about the event if I didn't tell you that alcohol played a major role. Can you hear me if I step away from that mic still?
Yes.
So it was, I'm just going to tell, stepping away from my notes, I'm just going to tell you my story. So it was September of 2001. I had been away at college for about 3 weeks. And there was a group of girls, and we all started hanging out, and we all started to jive, and we all liked each other, and we all started to go places together. So the town that I went to college in was famous for having a lot of bars. And there was this one bar in particular that all the roomers, everybody on campus said, you can go to this bar, you can show them your ID that it says that you're 18, and they're gonna let you in, give you a wristband, and you're gonna be able to drink. So the second week of school, we decided we were going to go check it out. And what happened? We got there. I showed them my ID that said I was 18 years old. They slapped a wristband on me, and I was able to go in and drink. I was like, I beat the system, right? So I did that for another couple of weeks. And all during this time period, my roommate at the time, she had met a guy named Victor. Now, Victor lived in Oswego, where I did my undergraduate degree, but he didn't go to school there, so he was what we call a townie. He just lived in town. But my roommate had met this guy. She thought that he was kind of cute. She seemed like she was really into him, and he kept showing up at this bar, too. So the one night, we're all there. There's me, 5 girls, and him and a couple of his friends, and we're all drinking, doing our thing, and it gets to be the end of the night, and it's time to get a cab back to the dorms. So all the girls go, they pile into the cab, and as I'm about ready to get into the cab, Victor says to me, hey, you don't have to get in this cab. I can give you a ride home for free. Now, it was a $10 flat rate, so 5 girls, $10 flat rate, that's $2 per girl. But in my 18-year-old freshman mind, when $2 meant everything to me, I was like, a free ride? I'm gonna take this free ride. Like, you girls go in the cab, I'm gonna take the free ride home. So I decided to forego the $2. I got in the car, and we get in the car, and he says that he needs to stop and feed his dog. Now, it's a little odd that you have to feed your dog at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I'm gonna go along with it. So, and we pulled up to a house, and he said, this is at my house, this is my aunt's house. And I felt a little uncomfortable, but I said, okay. And he invited me in, and I didn't want to be rude, so I went in. And then when we got inside, he said, well, why don't you take a tour of the house? Okay, so a tour of the house, we started downstairs, and then he wanted to show me the upstairs part of the house. Now, I knew at this time, my gut was telling me, something's not right. This isn't what's supposed to be happening right now. But I was scared, and I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to stop it. I was just so naive. And so the tour led to a bedroom, and once I got in that bedroom, I was not able to leave that bedroom. And I was raped and I was sexually assaulted by this person that wasn't a stranger, but it had been 3 weeks, so I didn't know who he was. The next morning, he drove me back to the dorms. He grabbed my wrist before I got out of the car, and he said, you know Diana likes me, right? And that was my roommate. And I said, yeah, I know Diana likes you. And he said, you wouldn't want Diana to get mad at you now, would you? And I said, no, I wouldn't want my new college roommate to be mad at me. He said, well, then it's probably a good idea if we just keep this between me and you. And I said, okay. So one thing I will say that I at least did for myself, and it's maybe the first place where I should have called for help, but I didn't. I showered, and then I went over to the campus health center, and I got myself Plan B. I had learned about Plan B when I was in high school, and I just knew if you have unprotected sex, you need to get Plan B unless you want to get pregnant. So I'm thankful that I had the wherewithal to do that. But I met with the doctor that morning, and the doctor asked me, this is hours after it happened, the doctor asked me what happened, and I told her that I was with my boyfriend and the condom broke. A professional was asking me what happened, and I couldn't get those words out of my mouth about what happened. I think I don't even know if at that point if I had even truly processed about what had happened to me. But I knew that I didn't want anybody to find out about it, so I kind of decided to bury it. So I really started struggling. I stopped going to class. My grades were suffering. I was being, very antisocial. I just didn't really want to be around people. I certainly didn't want to drink anymore. It scared me. I was afraid of what would happen if I did. And things kind of got bad for me that second semester of my freshman year. And so I decided that I was going to reach out to somebody and that I was going to tell somebody what happened to me. And so I told the person that I was closest to at that moment in my life, and that person didn't believe me. Not only did they not believe me, their words to me were, "You can't rape people who are willing." So when that person didn't believe me, and this was the person I trusted more than anyone in the whole entire world, I didn't know who would ever believe me. So I kind of decided right then, I guess I'm just never going to tell anyone ever again. I'm going to bury this. So growing up, the one thing I knew that I always had control over was my grades in school. And sometimes I turn to school as a crutch when things get too overwhelming for me. I like to do my homework, and I like to focus on tests and examinations and things like that. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to let this ruin my college career. I'm going to turn my GPA around, and I've got to do something. I took an Introduction to Criminal Justice course. I learned about victimology. I learned about sexual assault survivors. I learned about how many sexual assault survivors don't report. I started reading on the pages the things that had happened to me. And the book was talking about these are reasons why people won't report, because they're scared, because they're embarrassed, because they're shameful. And I was like, that's me. I'm scared. I'm embarrassed. I feel shameful. And it didn't take much beyond learning about sexual assault in my introduction class before I dropped my music education major and I changed my major to criminal justice. And then that was in fall 2002 when I changed my major to criminal justice. In spring 2003, I had a good friend, and she was sexually assaulted by an acquaintance. And I was able to, she didn't know about what had happened to me, but she trusted me. She felt comfortable coming to me. She told me. I was able to get her to the police station. I was able to stay with her while she got her rape kit. I was able to go with her to court when she had court appearances related to the case. I was able to stand by my friend from the beginning to the end. And I decided then, okay, so maybe I wasn't brave enough to stand up for myself from the beginning to the end, but maybe somebody else I can be brave enough for other people and help other people get to the end. And that's when I changed, again, that's right around the time I changed my major to criminal justice, started focusing on sexual assault awareness and prevention, and kind of how I got here today. So, in April of 2013, they told you I teach at UNC Pembroke. There was something called the Last Lecture series that happened at Pembroke. And the last lecture was basically where students could nominate a professor, and that professor would give a lecture to a group of students as if it was the last lecture that they were ever going to give. And I was nominated, and I won. And they said, you're going to give your last lecture. So I had to think, if this was the last time I was going to talk to students, what would I want to tell them about? And it had been, at that point, 12 years since my assault had happened to me. And I thought, if this was really, truly the last time I was going to address students, I would want them to know about what happened to me. So in April 2013, I delivered my last lecture where I first disclosed the story that I just disclosed to you a few minutes ago. And that day was kind of my coming out day. Telling that story was the biggest relief off of my shoulders that I had ever experienced. And in preparing for that lecture, I realized a few things. For a really long time, I viewed myself as a victim. But preparing for the lecture made me just realize that I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. And I'm not just a survivor, I thrived. I made it through that situation. I got my PhD. I'm studying and researching and doing the things that I want to do to make the differences that I want to see in the world. I didn't just survive, I thrive. And it also got me thinking about that $2 that I didn't spend. For a really long time, that $2 haunted me. I told myself at one point that I would pay $2 every hour of every single day if I could undo what happened to me. The $2, I just couldn't believe it. But as time has gone on and I've gotten farther removed from the situation and I've gotten closer and closer to things like today, it makes me realize that I wouldn't be who I am if that didn't happen to me. I would have continued to study music education. I probably would have had a nice job lined up for me in upstate New York. I wouldn't have gone to IUP and gotten my criminology degree. I wouldn't have gone to UNC Pembroke. I wouldn't have, if I didn't go to Pembroke, I wouldn't have met Dr. Ryder. If I didn't meet Dr. Ryder, then I wouldn't be standing in front of all of you today giving you this speech. Talk about the butterfly effect. Literally, those $2 that I didn't spend shaped and changed the course of my life. So I can tell you with all sincerity, I think it's the best $2 that I never spent. I wouldn't spend $2 to undo what happened to me, because everything that happened to me made me who I am today. Literally the best $2 I never spent. So something that has been a catalyst for me in my own coming out and that has influenced me as a criminologist has been the Me Too movement. Who here has heard of the Me Too movement? Okay, most of you. For those of you that are not aware about the Me Too movement, a few things about it. Actually, first, we give a lot of credit to Alyssa Milano, but did you know that the Me Too movement actually started in 2006? It started by a social activist named Tarana Burke, who promoted Me Too on her MySpace page as a way to show the magnitude of the number of people that were suffering from sexual violence. But of course, it became popular on October 15th, 2017, when actress Alyssa Milano tweeted the now infamous tweet that those who are survivors of sexual harassment and sexual assault should tweet Me Too as their status to encourage victims and give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem. By the end of the day, that October 15th, it had been used more than 200,000 times, and within 24 hours, it had been tweeted 500,000 times. On Facebook, the hashtag was used by more than 4.7 million people, and there were 12 million posts in the first 24 hours. In the United States, 45% of users had at least one friend who posted using the terms. So tens of thousands of celebrities, including male actors such as Terry Crews and James Van Der Beek, have responded to the hashtag with their own experiences of harassment and abuse. So in addition to Hollywood, Me Too declarations have elicited discussion of sexual harassment and abuse in the music industry, sciences, academia, and politics. I have been particularly fascinated with how Me Too has resonated in the academic community. Since 2013, when I first came out about being a sexual assault survivor, I have been very open with my students about my victimization. I usually end up disclosing my victimization to my students at some point during the semester. I also know other people who I went to school with, who I went to graduate school with, who also disclose about their victimization to their students. So knowing this made me wonder how many other professors are out there that are like me. So in November 2018, along with Dr. Shelley Clevenger at Illinois State University and Dr. Kim Cook at UNC Wilmington, I started a research study to see if we could find other professors who were survivors to see if they disclosed this information to their students. We advertised our study on numerous Facebook pages, Twitter hashtags, academic listservs, and as of this past week, we have conducted over 50 in-depth interviews with professors who are survivors of sexual abuse. I have interviewed people that have been teaching college for one semester, and I have interviewed people that have taught college for 50 years. We interviewed people from all different racial and ethnic backgrounds, as well as male, female, and transgender professors. And what we found, and what I'm pleasantly surprised to find out, is that I am not alone in my decision to disclose my victimization. In fact, the majority of our participants reported that they disclosed to their students either individually or as a class. There are many factors that go in the decision to disclose to students. Some professors disclose at the very beginning of the semester, while some disclose at certain points in the semester that's more driven by content. These professors report that they have received overwhelmingly positive feedback from students about their decision to come out as a survivor. The preliminary results of our study are encouraging and remind me that I'm doing the right thing by disclosing to my students, even as I speak to all of you today. So I know there are other survivors in this room. You may have heard about the Me Too movement. Maybe you thought about tweeting Me Too or telling a trusted friend, but you're scared of what will happen if you tell your story. So a question you might be asking yourself, and something I want to talk more about today, is what happens to you after you come out and you tell your story? Anybody wonder what happens to these people? So you come out, you tell your story, then what? It's been always fascinated me. So at least from my perspective, I wanted to share my experience that I've had about coming out publicly since with my victimization in 2013, and since sharing about my victimization on social media in 2017. So one thing that I found since coming out is that, and hopefully I truly believe this, if you come out to people, and especially if you come out to the right people and tell people, people are so kind, and people are so caring, and people are so passionate, and people are so receptive. I don't know why, I mean, in my mind, I had just built it up that if I told people that people were just going to look at me and say, you're a liar, you deserved it. You know, I was so afraid of what was going to happen. And the overwhelming majority of people have just been so supportive. When I came out on social media in 2017, during the Me Too, the first round of the Me Too movement, my old roommate from college, Diana, the one I told you about, she reached out to me. And she's, at one point, I had tried to kind of tell her about what happened, but she wasn't very receptive and didn't listen to me. And she sincerely apologized for not believing me all of those years ago. And she let me know that she believes me now. So that was one wonderful thing that came out of that. The person that I told you that didn't originally believe me, I reconciled with that person as a result of my coming out. So there are a lot of, hopefully you'll get a lot of positive reactions. Coming out also can be a teachable or learning experience for my students. So I think that there are things that you can learn from my experiences. So just from that story that I told you before, what are some things that you can learn from my story? Okay, definitely that's part of my message, believing in yourself. Anyone else learn anything from hearing about my experiences?
Also, just making, I know you said in the beginning where you decided not to get in the car with the young ladies, but I think nowadays you have to be together with, you know, whatever you see with that.
There are practical implications that come out of that story. Like I should not have separated. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm victim blaming myself, but it's something that I recognize. When you think about victimization runs a gamut. Like it runs a gamut from being completely responsible for your own victimization. Like if you're robbing a bank and you get shot in the process, then you're responsible for your own victimization. To completely innocent victims, like those students at the Newtown, Connecticut shooting when all of the kindergarten students were killed. They were completely innocent victims. But there's a whole lot that goes in between there. And I personally believe that me recognizing the factors that played into that night, I don't think that's blaming myself for it, because I don't blame myself for it, but I do recognize some of the things that I probably could have done to avoid that situation. I could have stayed with my friends. I shouldn't have been underage drinking. I definitely shouldn't have been drinking to excess. I shouldn't have gotten in a car with somebody that I didn't know. That, you know, those are the practical things that you can get out of it. And again, I don't say those things because those things can sound victim blaming. And I don't say those things to sound victim blaming at all. I just say those things because it's really, after 15 years, 20 years of reflection, it's really something that I've learned from that. But I also think you can learn lessons about trusting your gut, about if you know something is wrong, like I told you in that story, I knew something was wrong, but I let go of that gut feeling. Your gut is usually right. If your gut is telling you something is wrong, if your gut is telling you don't get in this car, don't go in this room. And it really has been a teachable moment for a lot of my students. I've had students who said, hey, I didn't let my friend leave with somebody last night, and now my friend's mad at me, but I'm glad because my friend is safe. And anytime I hear anything like that somebody learned one thing from me in my experience, it makes the whole experience worth it. So when you come out to people, it can be a teachable moment. Something, though, that you have to recognize is that when you do come out to people, that people will look to you as an ally, especially if you come out in a very public forum. People are automatically going to look to you and say, well, there's another survivor, so they're going to be empathetic to me and to what I'm going through. So be prepared that others are going to look to you as a source of comfort. It is empowering to hear the stories of other people's survival. It truly is amazing to hear about how much people can overcome and get through. But it can also, I will say about other people disclosing to you, that it can be a double-edged sword. When you hear from so many people, it brings the reality of the situation right to your doorsteps. And another thing you have to think about is, and I have to tell you as a professor, is that I am a mandated reporter. So when students come to me and they want to tell me about their victimization, I encourage them to, but they have to know I can't be their confidant. I'm not their therapist. I can't keep that a secret. I still work at a public institution, and I still have a Title IX officer that I absolutely have to tell about their victimization to. So I'm glad that so many students have come forward, but sometimes I have to deal with students that get angry with me when I have to move their case at least to the Title IX officer. It can also just be very draining to hear the stories. You can get sad sometimes hearing people's victimization stories. But I would say, as far as things you can do about that, first, try not to get yourself discouraged. Remember that victims of sexual abuse are being heard and their concerns are being validated. It's not a perfect world by any means, but survivors are more empowered now than they ever have been in history. And it's just all about your perspective and how you look at it. I personally view it as an honor that people feel comfortable enough to share with me. So yes, while it can be draining, at least for me, it's been empowering more than anything. And then finally, another aspect that I've had to deal with since coming out about my victimization is talking to potential dating partners about my victimization. And when I was in college, like, besides my grades, the next thing that I was worried about is having a boyfriend. And for many years, I just didn't have a boyfriend. And then I had boyfriends that I couldn't get comfortable with because I do have some lasting effects as a result of my victimization. As a result of it, it's hard for me to get intimate with people in certain situations. It triggers me. And for a really long time, that meant I didn't date anybody. But you just have to always remember this if you're deciding to tell your story. At the end of the day, it's your story and only yours alone to tell. You don't ever have to tell anyone what happened to you, and that is not something that is obligated of you. If you do decide to disclose, that is great, and I sincerely hope that you have a receptive and supportive partner on the receiving end. Here's something my grandmother told me growing up. She said, Renee, some people in life won't like you, and that's okay. Just remember, these are not your people, and cling to those that do love you. I've told people that I was dating and had them completely shut down on me after I tell them. Most of these relationships ended shortly after that. But when I met my now husband, Michael, he was the most caring, supportive, sensitive person I could have ever disclosed to. He thanked me for telling him and comforted me and let me know that I was believed and that he cared about me and would work to make sure I was always comfortable with him. It took me 33 years to find the response I was hoping to get. So when it comes to telling your romantic partners about your victimization, do what makes you comfortable and know that the person you're supposed to be with will never blame you or make you feel guilty about your victimization. So we've talked a lot today about things that I've experienced as a survivor, but I also want to take a minute and finish our discussion by talking a little bit about healing and what you as individuals can do moving forward. First of all, healing and justice look different for everyone. I've spoken with hundreds of survivors over the years, and no statement could ring more true. Healing is an ongoing process. It looks different for everyone, and everyone heals in their own time and in their own way. And so for all the survivors out there today, please hear this and take it to heart. And remember, while you may have been cracked by what happened to you, you are not broken. You survived. You are sitting here in a college classroom learning about sexual assault. You are stronger than you give yourself credit for. Don't compare my survival story with your survival story. Don't think that healing means you have to come out and speak in front of a large audience. There are many ways to heal, and you all can find your own individual way to heal. So some things that you can do to support survivors. I've alluded to this a couple of times today, but I want to make sure I directly address this, and especially on a college campus, the idea of victim blaming. Who here has heard of victim blaming? Okay, most of you. For those of you that haven't, victim blaming is a devaluing act that occurs when the victim or victims of a crime are held responsible, in whole or in part, for the crimes that have been committed against them. One reason that people blame a victim is to distance themselves from the unpleasant or traumatic experiences and thereby confirm their own invulnerability to the risk. People reassure themselves by thinking, because I'm not like them, because I don't do that, then this would never happen to me. Victim blaming attitudes marginalize the survivor and make it hard for them to know when it's okay to come forward and report. If the survivor knows that you or society blames them for the assault, they will not feel safe or comfortable coming forward and talking to you. Offenders sometimes state things like, she was asking for it, a statement that shifts blame for the attack onto the survivors. As a society, and we, especially women, have been bombarded with techniques on how to prevent being sexually assaulted. So things like watch your drink, don't dress too sexy, don't walk alone at night, don't drink too much. And of course, these don't seem like bad tips, but we need to understand something. This be safe mentality that we give to women, it builds a false sense of security by letting individuals believe that sexual assault is preventable. Sexual assault is not preventable. So someone who has taken all the proper precautions and is sexually assaulted might feel ashamed and confused, might feel like they should have done more to prevent the attack. Unfortunately, prevention techniques don't change the root cause of sexual violence. There is a difference between doing things that make you feel safe versus believing that when you take these precautions, you have no chance of being assaulted. Sexual violence is a crime of opportunity. Offenders look for the right moment and choose to commit a sexual assault while justifying their actions. Even if you did not take any precautions, you are never to blame for being assaulted. Always remember this. If you aren't a survivor yourself, always remember that you know a survivor. And that these survivors that you know, they listen to you and they listen to how you talk. I learned a lot about this during the second wave of the Me Too movement, which some of you might remember happened in last October 2018. around the swearing in of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Anybody remember that? And the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, professor of psychology at Palo Alto University. She gave harrowing testimony accusing Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her while they were in high school. Of course, Kavanaugh vehemently denied the allegations and was appointed to the Supreme Court in October 2018. Now, whether you believe Justice Kavanaugh or Dr. Ford, that's a personal decision that is up to you. But what I can tell you, as someone who supports survivors, is that I believe Dr. Ford. And I believe her testimony is powerful. And I have no reason to believe that she was not being truthful in her testimony. Personally, while I understand that the argument was heated on both sides, I will say that I personally called out a number of people on my social media who victim blamed Dr. Ford. At the end of the day, I believe that victim blaming is wrong and damaging to all survivors. In all of this, so on my social media, I had all these people that were posting all these terrible things about Dr. Ford, and I couldn't help but think about those people's family members and those people's friends, and how they knew people that were sexual assault survivors, and that's what those assault survivors were seeing on social media. And I wasn't sure if I was gonna say this today, but I guess I will say it, since we are talking about the Kavanaugh hearings. One of the biggest criticisms of Dr. Ford was that she didn't come out with the allegations when the assault first happened, and that she only came out with the allegations when Kavanaugh decided that he was going to run for Supreme Court Justice. And I just want to say, as somebody who was in Dr. Ford's position, that if the person that attacked me ever decided that they were going to run for Supreme Court Justice, I would be the first person that would be marching up to Washington to let them know exactly what type of person that was. So I completely understand where she was coming from, and I can say that I probably would have done the same thing. Please just always, if you take anything away from this, remember that you probably know someone who is a sexual abuse survivor, and they are watching and listening to you to see if you are a supportive place to land. Be a source of comfort for survivors and those around you. So I want to sincerely thank you all for taking time to listen to me today. And if there are any questions, I would love to hear your questions. Yeah.
So after you told your roommate, but you said that she didn't understand you or wasn't listening, can you how did you tell her? Because the guy liked her?
Because I tried telling her, the way I kind of put it was, I slept with Victor, but because I was still trying to process what it was. I was like, Victor and I slept together, but I didn't want it. And all she heard was that, like, I'm her friend, you had sex with the guy that I like, and that was it.
How soon was that?
That was probably a month into that spring semester. It happened to be in the beginning of the fall, and it was in that spring semester that I told her.
And you lived with her the whole time and you never told her?
I did.
Yes, doctor. Did you ever seek any professional counseling at all? Did you speak to a psychologist?
Absolutely. My therapist is like the greatest lady in the whole entire world. And that's what helped get me to the point in 2013 where I could say that I could stand up in front of a room and tell a room my story. A lot of mental health counseling. Like this was something that I told Dr. Ryder, I changed the speech around a little bit last night, but like something that I was going to talk about in the speech today is that I have a very big problem with anxiety. My very first memory is of having a panic attack. So I've been dealing with anxiety for a very long time, and a lot of times my anxiety causes me I blame myself for situations that go wrong around me. And I think that my anxiety really played a big role in what happened to me. and especially in the aftermath where I was so worried about what people were going to think, and I was worried about if people were going to believe me, and I had, just these racing thoughts, and I couldn't get things under control. So I am a big proponent of taking care of your mental health at whatever cost. Like, I'm not ashamed to talk about my mental health problems. I'm not ashamed that I take anxiety medication. I'm not ashamed that I have a kick-ass therapist who I love more than anything, and I love going and chatting with her every couple of weeks. So that's a good question. Thank you for bringing that up.
Did you tell your parents, or did you reach your parents or any family member?
Well, since we have reconciled about it, I will say that when I said in the story, the person that I told that was closest to me, it was my father. And my father told me that you can't rape people that are willing. He just assumed that I was being promiscuous, and that was what I was talking about. And so when my dad didn't believe me, because I guess in my mind, I had thought that I would tell him and he would hold me, and that we would go to the police station, and that we would go to the hospital, and like I had it in my mind of what it was that he was going to do. And when I called him and told him, and he told me that, like, I just completely shut down. Like, that wasn't the reaction that I was expecting, and I didn't know. And my dad didn't realize that he had even really said that to me until I gave the speech in 2013. And after that speech, my dad was in the audience for the speech. I didn't mention him by name, but he was in the audience for the speech. And after the speech, he was like, "That was me," and I was like, "Yeah, that was you." And oh my God, my dad was bawling. He was like crying. You've got to please forgive me. And I'm like, "Dad, like 20 years, like I understand, like things happen. Like it wasn't the best response, but like I look at me now, like I got through it." Like, so my dad still feels a lot of guilt about that. I've forgiven him a million times over. I would never hold anything like that against him, but it definitely put a stop to the whole process.
Did you ever go with anything like claiming against Victor?
Did I ever go to the police or anything?
Or do you know where Victor is now or anything like that?
No, I know his first and last name. I tried to look him up on social media one time, and I couldn't find him on social media. That probably wasn't the best idea, because I don't really know what I would have said. I know a first and a last name. I know to the town that he lived in. I know what branch of the military he was in and at what time. I don't plan on doing anything with it unless he wants to be a Supreme Court justice, and then I plan on jumping and telling it from the rooftops. And I've had students say, "What about if he did that to somebody else? If he did that to you, then he might have done that to somebody else." I know, that's the type of guilt that ate me up for 13 years. Was not telling and being afraid that he did that to somebody else. I can't put the weight of other people's victimization on my shoulders. I did the best. Don't we all do the best we can with what we have in the situation? I was doing the best I could with the tools that were in front of me, and yeah, I hope he never runs for Supreme Court justice.
You say, okay. So I wasn't in college or anything like this. I have actually been sexually assaulted as a kid. Till this day, I'm 50 years old, and I've never told my mother or my father or anything like that. But I'm all right. I did have to go to therapy, and that's where I felt the most comfortable, where I could say those things or whatever. But it was from my mom's best friend's brother they used to watch me. I used to play around the house and things of that nature, what have you. Now he has a daughter, and once again, I'm not in the position to be like, okay, yeah, you did something to me, 40 years ago or whatever and stuff. I would never do that because I'm comfortable within myself, and I got that comfortability when I went to therapy. But I don't think that if I had told my mom, I don't think that she would have believed me. That's why I never did tell her. So, but in my case, it was, once again, I'm okay or what have you, but I feel like it has had some effect on me, growing up, having boyfriends and married and, things of that nature, what have you and stuff. I get to the place where I get to the relationship piece and then I don't trust and then I just shut everything down or what have you. So I still think that still plays a major part in your growing up and your relationships and everything.
Absolutely, and thank you for having the courage to share with us today.
So if you see Victor again when you're growing and after all the success you had, what is your response? Or
If I saw him right now, I mean, I would probably have some angry words for him, but at the end of the day, isn't it always about forgiveness? Yeah. And the longer I stay mad at him, the more control and power that he has over me. Yeah. And so when I can say to him, of course I let him know, like, this is what you did and this is how it affected me, but I don't think about you on a daily basis. You don't control my life. Like, your thoughts don't affect my thoughts. Forgiveness isn't it. People think sometimes that forgiveness is about the person that's being forgiven, but it's not. Forgiveness is really about the person that's giving the forgiveness. Because when you give forgiveness, you're giving yourself permission to let go. And I gave myself permission to let this situation go about 6 years ago, and that's the only thing that I would want him to know, is that I forgive him.
Any other questions or comments? Just raise your hand, we'll bring you the mic. Okay, so this is the chance now for you to give us your feedback. Thank you for coming to Promise Day. We'd love to have your feedback on what kind of other events you'd like to see related to this, how you think we could improve. And we really value your feedback, so much so that we're going to enter you into a drawing to win a Starbucks gift card, right? I think we have 5 of those, Abby, is that right? So this means you would take out your phone. This is the only time a teacher of yours might tell you to take out your phone now, right? Take out your phone and you can visit this website, SurveyMonkey. There's a code there to put on the end of the URL. It'll take you to a short survey and you can go ahead and enter your feedback. It's also a good chance to remind everybody we're collecting raffle tickets. So we need the part with your phone number, your name. We're going to do the drawing at...
And then I'm going to share with you other Promise Day events that are coming up. Hopefully we'll see you there too.